What's going on, friends? This is Neil Adler with another episode of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. Happy Tuesday. College basketball was back on Monday. Start the 2025-26 season. Who's psyched for hoops? I'm psyched for hoops. Love college basketball. College basketball will always be my number one sport. I'm not just saying that because I went to Syracuse either. I love college basketball. Always loved it. But yeah, obviously focused on Syracuse basketball. They started off their 2025-26 season with a win, and I'll preface it by saying, look, I know it's Binghamton, America East Conference, not won 15 games last year, not Kansas, not Houston, but it was a good win for Syracuse, 85-47 at the Dome. Just to start it off on a positive note. And by the way, friends, thanks so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your support. If you feel so inclined, hit that subscribe button and drop me comments about what you want to see on the show. But we're obviously going to focus on Syracuse basketball today on Tuesday, with the game last night. And Syracuse's next game is against Delaware State on Saturday. But look, you can't glean too much from one game. But based on obviously last season, team struggled 14-19 overall, terrible on defense. Just and the as we talked about on Syracuse Central, the exhibition slate wasn't super impressive. So to come out and they were like a 21 or 22 point favorite, and they won by, I'm never good at math, but 38. Yeah, that's a convincing win. And the thing that I was most pleased about, besides obviously the defense, which we'll get into, they didn't take, and I was, when I was doing stuff on social media last night for the game, they didn't take their foot off the gas. And granted, Binghamton had a ton of turnovers and shot like crap, and so fine, it's one game, but just, this was like a thing for Syracuse in the exhibition slate, and just in recent years, and not just under Autry, just in general, they need to blow out teams like this. Not just for net rankings and efficiencies and all the metrics and all that stuff, just for the mindset. Screw this, we're a good team and we're gonna, these mid-majors, no disrespect to Binghamton or but we're gonna destroy you guys. We're gonna destroy you. And we're not afraid of Houston or Kansas out at the Players Era or whatever, Tennessee, but these other guys, we're gonna crush you. And so let me look here. I don't remember what their largest lead was. They led for 98.7% of the game. Their largest lead was 39. And they ended up winning by 38. So, their largest lead was at the end of the game. And, that's not typical of Syracuse team. So kind of go into stall ball or just kind of have defensive lapses or whatever. The other team hits a bunch of threes and make it a closer game. And the game was out of hand for a while, or out of reach, I should say, for Binghamton. But I thought it was and Eric Deverendorf, the former Syracuse basketball star, who was on the ACC Network extra call with Matt Park. And by the way, congrats to Matt Park, who was going to be this year's recipient of the Marty Glickman Award, for sports broadcasting, and just tremendous honor for Matt. But I just, Devendorf talked about how, they didn't take their foot off the gas, and they just, it was a good win. Again, I know it's Binghamton, but it was a good win. And after, Autry, even though he called them out and said he was disappointed in the energy and the effort level, the intensity against pace in that second exhibition. Autry's demeanor is not quite as demonstrative as Dan Hurley or Jim Boeheim or some other guys, but he still called him out. And they just came out, they came ready to play today. And, you could nitpick here and there, and I still think they didn't shoot well from three, and sometimes they would settle, but they played well, and they showed their athleticism on Monday night. So again, just kind of pie in the sky, macro, level. It's one game, but just the way they won it, and just extending that lead down the stretch, and just putting the clamp down on this other team. I like that a lot. So we'll get into some more specifics here. And the first thing I want to talk about is the defense, because, again, it's one game. But Syracuse stunk on defense last year. They gave up, 77, 78 points a game. Their scoring margin was negative because they scored like 75 and gave up like almost 78, I think. And that's not surprising when you're under 500. But let me just get some of the stats here, just because I can't remember stuff off the top of my head. But Binghamton shot 33% from the field, 1 of 13 from deep. Syracuse +9 on the boards overall. Binghamton had 22 turnovers, and I think they had 15 in the first half, so they obviously cut it down in the second half. Syracuse only had 5. And Syracuse last year had problems turning the ball over and their opponents getting more points off turnovers than Syracuse was getting. It No, not tonight. Not tonight, my friends. This is an important stat, just for, again, macro level. Binghamton had 22 turnovers. Syracuse had 5. Points off turnovers. Syracuse led 24-4. 24-4. That's insane. That's insane. How many steals did they have? Let me look that. 11 steals for Syracuse. Binghamton didn't have any. Nate George on his own had 5 steals. And we'll get into him a little bit when we talk about the top performances. But again, I know it's one game. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I just like the defensive intensity. I like the energy. I feel like this Syracuse team, again, if they're not shooting well from deep, scoring points in transition, getting points off turnovers, easy buckets, all that kind of stuff. Just, yeah, that's key. That's key. So I like the defense tonight. Yeah, I mean, William Kyle was flying all over the place. He had 5 boards. Donnie had 6. Sadiq had 4. Nate George had 4. Nate George was great on Monday night. So, again, one game, fine, I get it. And obviously drop me comments. What do you think? I thought it was a good defensive performance. They gave up 47 points. How many did Binghamton have at halftime? I'm totally blanking here. They had 14 points at halftime. But that's the point I brought up in the first segment. Syracuse led 32-14 at halftime. They were up by 18 points, but they actually outscored them by more in the second half, which is like not something based on the exhibition slate and just like recent years that you'd think. They gave up more points, but they also scored more points. They outscored them Binghamton 53-33 in the second half. So again, one game, but that was good. That was good. All right, so who were the standout performers for Syracuse? Well, one thing we have to obviously monitor is J.J. Starling, and we'll see what the long term. He had a lower body injury. He only played a couple minutes. Hopefully, he's all right long term. But Autry played 11 guys. The only guys that didn't play were Sheffing Diawara and Aaron Womack, both of whom I could see redshirting. Donnie Freeman, 7 of 11 from the field, 20 points, 6 boards, a couple blocks. Nate George stuffed the stat sheet. And Devendorf said this on the call, and I agree with him. We all look at Nate George as, he averaged 6.5 assists last year, led the ACC, so a facilitator. But as Devo said, when he's looking to score as well and being aggressive, it kind of opens things up. And I'm not saying he's going to lead the team in scoring, but he was 6 of 9, 2 of 4 from deep, and he didn't shoot great from 3 last year. I feel like maybe like 34%, 35%. But he had 14 points, 8 assists, only 1 turnover, 4 boards, 5 steals. Tremendous. William Kyle, he was 8 of 9 from the field. He was flying above the rim. Again, let's see how he fares against tougher competition, but he was 8 of 9, 16 points, 5 boards. And that dude is just ultra athletic. Kyan Anthony, he started in the second half because Starling was out, but he in 28 minutes, he actually had the most minutes of any of the guys played, because obviously with the game out of hand, some of the starters played less. But he was 6 of 10 from the field. He hit a 3, 15 points, 3 boards. 3 assists. Um, Tyler Betsy didn't shoot great, but he did end up with 10 points. And that dude is like, he's big. Like and I don't know if it was someone on Syracuse Central or maybe it was Inside the Loud. I don't know. It was someone made a comment. It might have been on Inside the Loud House on Monday night. We talk about the typical Syracuse like wings and stuff, or even guard. Like great height, great length, and all that. But a lot of times they're wiry and they're bouncy, but they're not as like bulky. And Betsy, I'm not saying he's like bulky, but like he's got a big frame. So he didn't shoot again, but he did. And I think it was the first exhibition. He shot well. He was 3 of 3 from deep, and I think he scored 14 points. But Betsy, be a key guy off the bench, and Soiree didn't do. Ibrahim Soiree didn't do a couple rebounds. Fennell had 2 points. He did have a couple boards. Bryce Effer, he had a couple rebounds. He's a good defender, though. He's a good defender. So, I'm not saying Autry's going to play. He's not going to play 11 guys all the time. But, I feel like you get like Freeman and Starling, consistent George. Nate Kings didn't do much scoring wise, but if he gets going, but then you got William Kyle, look, 16 points. I mean, that's a bonus. That's gravy. Sadiq didn't shoot well, but he can certainly. So they got scores. And they're athletic and crash the. It's all about getting stuff in the paint and transition. Because again, let me look it up. They were 4 of 21 from deep, but they shot 53% overall. They were 31 of 30. Excuse me. No. Did I get that wrong? 31 of 45. Good Lord. That's almost like 60. They shot like basically 60, if my math's right, like 67% from non-threes, from 2-point attempts. 11 of 16 from the line. That's not great. They need to be at 75%, not 68, 69%. Again, fine on the boards. 31 to 6 in bench points. They had 21-3 lead in fast break points, 11-0 in steals, 24-4 points off turnovers, 26-point edge in the paint. Second chance points was relatively even. Again, I know it's Binghamton, but it was a solid game, and I feel like this team. I don't know. They might not have a lot of great shooters, or maybe they'll just be kind of hot and cold from deep. But, if they can get a lot of stuff around the rim and if they get to the free throw line, make their free throws, like this team, I don't think is going to have a ton of issues scoring. I mean, we'll see against Duke or Louisville or Kansas, Houston, Tennessee, those types of dudes. But the defensive effort and the only committing 5 turnovers, that kind of stuff is encouraging. All right, let's finish up here with just a little bit of recruiting nuggets in 2026. I don't have like super crazy intel. As I noted on Syracuse Central last week, had it first about Jordan Smith Jr. He took an unofficial on this past Sunday. I'll check in with some people to see how it went. I'm sure it went fine. I would assume that Syracuse is still trying to get Jordan Smith Jr., who's a 2026 5-star shooting guard from the DMV, St. Paul VI Catholic in Northern Virginia, All-American, number 2 player, according to 24/7 Sports Composite. I assume they're going to try and get him on campus for an official at some point. He's taken 2 unofficials now, and he is not going to sign unless something weird transpires in the early period, because the early period is like in a week or 2. He's got a top 6 of Syracuse, Duke, Georgetown, Indiana, Kansas, and Arkansas. Syracuse, as I've been saying on Syracuse Central, I feel like I take the field over Syracuse, but I don't think that Syracuse is out of this. They got crazy, awesome connections between Autry and Brendan Strawn to Team Takeover, Smith's AAU EYBL program, and Autry used to be an assistant at St. Paul VI back in the day. We'll see. The top 2 targets for Syracuse are Smith and Deron Rippey Jr. I caught up with Deron's dad just via text on Monday. because the Rivals, one of the primary recruiting services, updated their 2026 national rankings, and Duron Rippey Jr. is a five-star point guard from New York City. He plays at the Blair Academy in New Jersey. And he moved up to number 5 overall, according to Rivals. So I texted Duron's dad, because we're friends, and I was just saying congrats or whatever. And then we were just, shooting the breeze, and I just, but just asked him kind of what the process is right now. And he said he's Duron Rippey Jr. is visiting, taking an official to NC State this weekend, and then he'll be done with his officials. And then at some point after that, they're going to drop a top 5. Right now, I think he's got a top 9 with Syracuse in it. Syracuse hosted him on an official in late September. They unofficially hosted. He went on unofficial to Syracuse late February of 2024 on Jim Boeheim Day. I truly don't know if. I hope that Syracuse makes his top 5, even if they don't end up winning out. Again, I don't think Duron's going to sign during the early period, because it's in like a week or two, and he's just finishing up his last official this weekend. But Duron's dad has told me they haven't made that decision yet, so we'll see. I would hope that Syracuse makes his top 5. They've been recruiting him and Smith longer than any other respective program has recruited either of those dudes, but that doesn't mean they're going to prevail. And some analysts that I read stuff on or have talked to, some of the schools that like kind of are brought up a lot with Smith are Duke. Duke is definitely in Arkansas. And for Rippey, you mentioned Duke. And then he played on the Adidas AAU circuit, so they mentioned Adidas schools, Tennessee and NC State. So, we'll see. We'll see. Besides those two, the only other guy that they're really focused on that is Syracuse in the 2026 class is Asher Elson from New York City as well. Took an official in mid-October. He plays in overtime elite. And Syracuse is in his top 4 with Maryland, Auburn, and one other school I'm blanking on. I think it's Xavier. Sorry if I'm wrong on that. I think it's Xavier. So I think Syracuse has a shot there for sure. And I don't know if he's necessarily going to sign early either. I haven't seen anything about a timetable for his commitment, but he does have a top 4. Besides that, I've mentioned, they're looking at Clyde Walters potentially as a reclass from 2027 to 2026. He's from Alabama, played at Brewster Academy, and then now he's an overtime elite. And we'll see if Syracuse gets him up for a visit. I mean, I think the thing you got to keep in mind, and I've talked about this a bunch on Syracuse Central and elsewhere. It's definitely been kind of like a weird cycle for Syracuse. I mean, they offered over 20 guys, and obviously things that ebb and flow. And I think the main thing is there's uncertainty about if this current staff led by Adrian Autry is going to be the staff next year. If they do well and get to the tournament, then yeah, we're good to go. And then maybe we'll see about a Duron Rippey Jr. or Jordan Smith or whoever else. But there's uncertainty. If they're not good or they're like okay, but kind of like they're, we don't know if Autry would be back. And of course I want the staff to do well and be back. The other thing is they've got 13 scholarship guys right now, but only 4 of them would have exhausted their eligibility, I believe. Kings, George, Starling, and Zephyr. So they could have up to 9 guys back, and you never know the portal, what they do there. One other guy to note that Syracuse hosted on an official last October of last year is Alex Costanza, and I've talked about him on Syracuse Central. He's from Florida. He's playing at the Spire Academy in Ohio this year. He committed over the weekend to Georgetown, and like I said, he officially visited Syracuse last October. It went well. His dad told me that Syracuse was one of the front runners. Syracuse was in for him, in other instances, whether on the AAU circuit or I believe they've also visited with him in Florida at his former high school, Westminster Academy. But then they visited with him, Autry and Alan Griffin, on the AAU circuit. He played in the Puma Pro 16 League, and they were in for him during a live period in July. And then Alex's dad, Ed, told me that they never heard from Syracuse since. So clearly Syracuse backed off, just like it sounded like they kind of backed off from Von Carvalho, even though, I was told that they were still trying to get him on campus for a visit. But then I was also told a little bit later on that they kind of reevaluated things. And, I don't know about the ins and outs of NIL and rev share and all that, but, maybe they like the guys on on their current roster better, or maybe Alex or Vaughn or some of these other guys ultimately decided that they wanted to go in different directions. I mean, it happens. This stuff in recruiting happens, and it's fluid. And I do feel like the 2026 cycle for Syracuse is kind of a little strange, just again based on the uncertainty surrounding the staff. Still looking for their first verbal, but if the team's doing well and it's all good, and we're not going to see any changes with Autry or any other staff members, maybe they pick up. I don't think they're going to get Jordan Smith and Duron Rippey. Maybe they get one of them. Maybe they get Asher. Maybe they get Clyde Walters as reclass. Maybe they get someone completely that we don't even know that they're pursuing right now. Because as I've talked about, I think on Syracuse Central and definitely for Inside the Lighthouse, these former pro players are in the G League are getting recruited by college programs. So maybe Syracuse goes that route. Who knows? It's been a weird cycle. And I really feel like Alex genuinely was interested in Syracuse. But again, maybe Syracuse just decided they wanted to go in different directions, even though he's a top 20 national prospect. But, maybe they want to retain their current guys. Focus on that, or focus on portal recruiting, or look at former pro G League guys. We'll see. It's been a weird cycle. So I'll keep on top of it. Yeah. So that's 2026 recruiting updates. Not terribly much there, but it was encouraging that Jordan Smith was on the campus, and actually Calvin Russell, the football recruit who might play for the basketball team, was also on campus this past weekend. So Syracuse had 5-star prospect both in football and basketball on campus same weekend. Unfortunately, the football team stunk it up, but that's still cool. It's always cool to have big names on campus. Okay, so that's going to do it for today's edition of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. I'm Neil Adler, your host. Hostess with the mostest, or not the mostest, whatever you want to call it. But like I said, thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe if you feel so inclined. And again, drop me comments about what you want to see, what you want me to talk about, what you like, what you don't like. I welcome all feedback. Again, to recap, good first win for Syracuse. Good first win for the Syracuse basketball program. They put the clamps down on Binghamton, and I know it's Binghamton, but shout out to Tony Kornheiser, DMV guy, PTI, Binghamton grad. But it was a good first win for Syracuse basketball. And we'll get back into probably some more football later this week, and basketball and recruiting for both sports. And I appreciate your support. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, friends. I will talk to you again on Wednesday for Hump Day. Take care.